My son punched me over a word from his wife. I didn't fight back. I just sold the house. I am Celeste Steen Ward. I am 71 years old, and my son punched me over a word from his wife. I didn't fight back. I just sold the house. I used to believe that if I lived kindly, stayed quiet, and always put others first, no one would have the heart to hurt me. But I was wrong, and it took me many years to see that. I'm not telling this story to complain. I'm not looking for sympathy or for anyone to take my side. I just think maybe somewhere out there's another woman sitting in her familiar kitchen, holding on to something that's no longer warm, yet still can't bring herself to let it go. If that's you, or if you've ever known someone like that, then stay with me for a while. I want to tell you about an autumn day, about a smile that lasted too long, about a slap from the child I once held every day for the first 3 years of his life, and about how I didn't slap back, but quietly sold the home I had protected my entire life. Not because I was weak, but because it was finally time to do the right thing for me. I knew my daughter-in-law didn't like me. But that day, when Tanya sat down at my kitchen table and smiled for just a little too long, I knew something was coming. The early November breeze carried the scent of wood smoke and pine. It slipped through my kitchen window, brushing a few silver strands across my forehead. I stood by the stove, one hand still on the kettle's handle, but my heart stirred, unsettled by the overly polite silence behind me. Tanya sat there in her beige wool dress, hands folded neatly in her lap, wearing a smile tinged with expensive perfume and something I couldn't quite name. Not warmth, not honesty, and certainly not kinship. I picked up some cinnamon crisps from a new bakery near work. "Would you like to try one?" Her voice was sweet, drawn out like an apartment commercial. I didn't answer right away, just picked up the tea tin, chose 2 mint lime sachets, and placed them into the old porcelain mugs my husband used to favor. One for me, one for the guest. When I turned around, Tanya was still smiling, but her eyes had started scanning my kitchen, lingering a bit too long on the wooden cabinet where I kept important papers. "Do you still take walks to Blue Rock these days?" she asked, light and casual. I nodded, still not meeting her eyes. "That's lovely. That place is just so charming. I admire how well you keep everything in order, especially living here all by yourself." I gave a faint smile. Young people use words like admirable when they really mean outdated. Tanya stayed for about 10 minutes, sipped tea, complimented my clean floor, made small talk about the weather until her voice dropped and her tone shifted. "By the way, have you ever thought about transferring the house title?" I set my mug down slowly as I could manage. "What if you added Grant's name to the deed? Not to sell it, just, as a precaution in case something happens. It would make things simpler down the line." I didn't respond, just stood up quietly and poured more hot water into the kettle. The tea was weak now but still warm, much like the trust I once had in Tanya. Once real, once fragrant, now just a faded aftertaste. "No pressure at all," she continued. "Just something to consider." She took a sip of her cold tea. I gave a small nod. No promise, no refusal. Just pulled out a little notebook from the kitchen drawer and jotted a few lines the moment she left. An old habit I never broke, writing down whatever made me uneasy, even if it was just scattered words. Tanya left not long after. Before stepping out, she adjusted her scarf and said softly, just loud enough for me to hear, but quiet enough to pretend it was nothing, "You should do the right thing. Otherwise, Grant will find his own way to protect his family." I froze, my hand still holding the door open, eyes still watching the red leaves on the road outside. I said nothing, just nodded like someone receiving a notice from the bank. No more, no less. The door closed behind her, and my house returned to its usual quiet, the kind that doesn't always feel peaceful. I didn't go upstairs right away. My kitchen still smelled of mint tea and perfume. I sat down, ran my fingers along the worn edge of the wooden table, finding a small nick beside the salt jar, where Grant, as a boy, used to tap with a fork while waiting for cookies. He doesn't wait anymore, and I have nothing left to bake. I got up and opened the wooden cupboard near the window. Beneath a stack of old newspapers and a tin of hair clips was the silver-blue metal box where I kept important documents. I took out a photocopy of my husband's life insurance policy, the one I'd kept since he passed. There it was, blue ink and a familiar signature at the bottom. Sole beneficiary, Celestine Ward. I stared at that line for a long time, not because I doubted it, but because I remembered what David said when he updated the policy. I just want everything to be clear. After me, it's only you. I laughed then, told him not to be morbid. He only nodded quietly, like he'd seen something I hadn't yet imagined. I put the paper back in the box, sealed it gently, then wrote a short note in my notebook. Tanya brought up adding Grant to the deed. Smiled too much. Cold tea, hard cookies, first chill of the season. Not to be trusted. I put the notebook away, locked the cabinet, and finally went upstairs. The next morning I woke up at 6:15 like always. No alarm needed. The sky was still dim, Pagosa Valley's signature gray in late autumn. Maple leaves covered the walkway, damp and the color of old wine. I made tea, picked up the local paper from the porch. The first section I always read is the obituaries, not because I expect someone to die, but because it's the only part of life that tells the truth. Death doesn't lie, doesn't talk in circles. In a black frame, I saw the name of Mr. Rogers' wife, the one who used to sell bread at the market down by the highway. She passed in her sleep, aged 83. She left in peace, survived by 3 sons, 6 grandchildren, and an oven still warm. I folded the paper, a lump in my throat. Not from grief, but because I had no one left to leave warm bread behind for. The tea had gone cold. I finished the last sip, pulled on my sweater, and decided to walk to Blue Rock Cafe, about 5 blocks from my house. That little cafe is one of the few things in Pagosa Valley that hasn't changed. Steam fogged the windows. The owners, a young couple, always greet me by name and save me a sugar-free butter cake. I sat by the window, sipping hot coffee, listening to the spoon clink against the glass. Through the misted window, I saw Hazel walk by on the other side of the street, a dear friend I hadn't seen in nearly 2 months. I didn't call out, just watched her until she disappeared behind a row of parked cars. Some relationships, the older they get, the harder they are to touch again. Like wool left folded too long. It pulls apart if you try to stretch it now. I got home around 10. The sun had come out. I pulled out the silver-blue box again. Checked the policy one more time. It was strange. I wasn't afraid of losing papers. I was afraid I'd put my faith in the wrong person. My phone buzzed. A message from Grant. Busy with meetings all day. Tanya said you didn't respond. Are you okay with it? I didn't reply. Just wrote one more line in my notebook. No response doesn't mean yes. It means I need time to see more clearly. Grant came by the next day but didn't ask how I was. He just said, "Did Tanya say anything to you?" I was peeling an apple when he walked in unannounced. He used to smile whenever he stepped into my kitchen, his hand brushing lightly over my shoulder, like touching an old memory. Today there was no touch at all. I set the knife down. "Yes, a few things," I answered, softer than usual. He didn't sit, just stood there, eyes scanning the room as if searching for something without a name. Did she mention anything about the house? I reached for a glass from the cupboard. She said some things, but I think I need time. Grant said nothing. The silence stretched. Then finally, "I just want everything to be simple." And with that, he said he had to get to work. When the door closed behind him, I found myself wondering what I had done wrong, or when exactly the wrong started. Was it when I sent Grant away for school? When I didn't stop him from marrying Tanya? Or was it when I let him believe I could be simplified? I walked into my room and opened the drawer beneath the desk. The insurance form was still there, neatly folded. I looked at the line with my name, not to confirm it, but to anchor myself to something certain. In this house, it seems only the paperwork hasn't betrayed me. I grabbed my coat and went out. Blue Rock was open like every Monday morning. A familiar voice greeted me. "Morning, ma'am." "The usual tea?" I nodded. A young girl in a cream apron added, "It's really chilly today. We've got a croissant special. Would you like to try one?" I wasn't hungry, but I said yes, because her question held something warm. Something my son hadn't brought with him that morning. I chose the table by the window. Outside, the wind rattled the glass, though the snow hadn't started yet. An old man at the bar laughed loudly with someone, his voice full of tobacco and old memories. I pulled out my phone and opened my contacts. Russell Pike. His name sat among others that no longer had owners. I pressed call. He picked up after 3 rings. His voice was as slow and steady as it used to be. "Celestine, it's been a long time. You doing all right?" "I need to see you," I said, "about the house and some old papers." He paused for a few seconds, then replied, "I'm still upstairs at the old bank building. The room with the squeaky leather chairs. You remember it?" I did. I remembered it well. The second floor of the old bank still smelled of worn leather and damp paper, as if time had failed to persuade it to change. Russell sat behind a scratched wooden desk, wool cap on his head, a pipe resting in a porcelain dish beside a stack of folders. "You don't need to explain much," he said before I could speak. "I've seen too many wives, too many mothers become strangers in the very homes they built." I looked down at my hands. It had been a long time since someone spoke to me that plainly. Russell slid a yellow envelope toward me. "This is the ownership transfer form, if you ever decide to add or remove a name. But if you're not ready, I suggest you keep the original documents safe and don't discuss them with anyone." I nodded. "Thank you." On the drive back, I didn't head straight home. I drove out to Hazel's farm. I didn't call ahead, but Hazel never needed a warning. She was feeding the horses, eyes on the horizon, tossing bundles of hay with the practiced ease of someone who's never waited to be helped. "You're here," she said, without turning. I stepped out of the car and leaned against the wooden fence. I didn't want to go home just yet. Something happened. Tanya and Grant. Hazel didn't ask for details. She just said, "I never married because I knew I'd have to do everything on my own. And if I had to do it alone, I wanted to choose a house no one could throw me out of." We stood in silence for a while. Then Hazel walked into the house and came back with a set of keys. I don't have cameras, but I've got 2 dogs who bark at all the right times. If you need a place to disappear for a few days, the back room has a clean bed. I took the keys, didn't say thank you, just looked at her for a long time, trying to memorize the lines of her face. I got home as the sky began to darken. The porch light was already on, earlier than usual, as if someone was trying to make the house seem warmer than it really was. On the table, my phone blinked with a message from Tanya. "Dinner at your place Friday. Grant has something to discuss." I didn't open it right away, didn't turn the phone off either, just let it sit there, pulsing with light like a quiet, steady blink from something I no longer believed was harmless. Tanya said, "We're calling this Friendsgiving, but really today is about uniting the family." And when I heard that, a chill ran down my spine. She said it while calmly pouring hot apple cider into glasses, as if her words carried no special weight. Grant didn't react. Lacey kept her head down, and I, just for a moment, felt the air in that kitchen, once filled with laughter and the smell of pumpkin pie, thicken like raw dough that would never bake through. I remembered last fall when Lacey had called me the best grandma in the world after I taught her how to make fruit tarts. This year, she didn't look at me once during dinner. Tanya kept spooning food onto her plate, asking, "No green beans, sweetheart?" "And you're too skinny, darling," as if I'd never once cooked all her favorite dishes. The roast chicken, the cinnamon in the cider, everything tasted just right. But nothing felt like a holiday. The golden light above the table flickered at odd intervals. Forks and knives tapped softly, like marching feet echoing down an empty sidewalk. Tanya set her glass down. "You know, I think it's time we talked about the future. Everyone needs a plan. None of us are getting any younger." I said nothing. Grant shifted his chair forward slightly. "Mom," he began, voice steady but tight, "I need you to sign over the house. We're planning to use it as collateral to expand the office. It's an investment for the future, for Lacey." I looked at Tanya. She smiled lightly, like she was suggesting new curtains. "Grant," I said, just loud enough. "This is my house. Your father left it to me, not to be leveraged." The air changed instantly. Lacey froze, her fork midair, eyes finally meeting mine, but she said nothing. "You're being selfish," Grant snapped, sudden as thunder in a moonless sky. Tanya made a show of gasping. "Grant, please don't make a scene." I calmly poured myself more cider. My hand was steady. Then Tanya's voice, sweet as syrup. "We only want to protect the family's assets. If something ever happened to you, I set my glass down. Nothing's going to happen to me. I'm still healthy. You won't live forever, Grant said, rising to his feet. But you can destroy everything we've built just by clinging to something that belongs in the past. Then he slapped me. I didn't fall. I didn't flinch. I just felt the heat spread across my cheek. Not from pain, but from the shock. Not from the slap itself, but from the hand that delivered it. The same hand I once held through sleepless nights. The same boy who cried when I worked late at the library. Tanya covered her mouth. Oh my God. Lacey stood, pulled out her phone, then quietly set it back down. I said nothing. Just stood up, walked into the kitchen, opened the freezer, and pulled out a bag of ice. I wrapped it in a towel, pressed it gently to my cheek. The kitchen fell silent as if dinner had never happened. Silent enough to hear the flickering lamp, silent enough to hear the clock ticking one beat at a time. For a few seconds I heard nothing else, maybe just the burning in my cheek, maybe the sound of my own breath, or maybe it was Lacey, frozen, her spoon suspended midair. I stood. No one helped me. No one apologized. Tanya only reached out, voice honeyed. Grant, come on. I opened the fridge, took out a clean towel, ran it under cold water, held it to my cheek softly, just enough to keep the sting from turning into something worse. The dining room lamp flickered again behind me. Maybe a loose wire, or maybe the universe blinking at me saying, "Wake up." On the other side of the wall, Tanya's voice tried to smooth it all over. No one wants to pressure you, but sometimes we have to do things for others, right, Grant? Lacey remained silent. I imagined her eyes down, staring into her plate like always, unsure whose side to take. But I didn't blame her. No one teaches children how to choose between kindness and duty. I looked up at the exposed brick wall where the black and white photo still hung. David was smiling in it, arm around my shoulder back when we were in Texas, before the illness, before everything broke. I whispered, not sure if to him or to myself. I think I finally know what I need to do, David. I took the towel from my cheek, set it on the counter, wiped my hands on my apron, and walked back out. No one said a word. Grant was back in his chair, fingers locked, eyes downcast. Tanya poured more juice for Lacey, pretending nothing had happened. I didn't speak, just cleared the plates, packed each dish into glass containers, stacked them neatly in the fridge like always, as if it had been a normal dinner. The roast chicken now smelled sour. The warm lighting felt dim and hollow, like a candle struggling to stay lit. There was an emptiness inside me I'd never felt before, but for the first time it didn't scare me. I left the dishes to soak. Didn't wash them. Took off my apron, hung it on the hook behind the door. Then I went upstairs, locked the door behind me. I opened my drawer, took out the photocopy of the insurance policy, turned it over, and wrote a single line. No longer safe. And for the first time in years, I knew exactly what I would do tomorrow. And I slept without needing pills. I didn't shout. I didn't ask questions. The next morning, I simply stood in front of the real estate office, appraisal report in hand. The November sky over Pagosa Valley was thick and gray, like ashes that hadn't cooled. The wind was cold but not cruel, just sharp enough to remind me I was still awake. Pinned to my coat was a small brass bird, David's old brooch. I hadn't worn it in years, just like I hadn't stood here in a long time on Main Street with a plan in mind. The receptionist peered at me through oversized glasses. "Who would you like to see, ma'am?" "No appointment. I just need a home appraisal," I said, placing a stack of papers and a few color photos on the counter. She blinked in surprise, then nodded and offered me a seat. 10 minutes later, I walked out with a quick sale appraisal, clearly stamped in red ink. Suitable for immediate transaction. Cash preferred. No one asked why. No one needed a reason. In towns like this, people only need just enough of one to stay out of your business. I drove straight to the bank. No app, no wire transfer. I wanted to do it all by hand. I wanted to feel the chill of the desk under my fingertips as I signed each page. The teller looked up through the glass. "Good morning, Mrs. Ward. How can I help you today?" "I'd like to withdraw all my savings and move it to a private account. No shared access, no power of attorney." He furrowed his brow, then nodded. "Of course, it'll just take a little time. That's all right. I've got time." While I waited, I stared out at the parking lot through the tall window. Still gray skies, but no rain. Blue Moon played softly through the ceiling speakers. No one sang along. No one turned it off. I'd once told Hazel, if I ever disappear from that house, it won't be because I was forced out. It'll be because I chose to go. Today, I kept my word. On the way out, I stopped by the little cafe where David and I used to drink hot cocoa. The young server smiled. "Ma'am, the usual today?" I nodded. "And an apple tart to go if there's any left." She wrapped it carefully, labeled the bag. "Take care, Mrs. Ward." I couldn't tell if she knew something or if in this town everyone just knows, but no one says a thing. That afternoon, I rented a small moving truck. The neighbors saw me loading boxes into the back, but I just smiled and said, "Taking a break for a few weeks. Just need a change of scenery." They nodded, didn't ask more. Later that night, Hazel opened the back gate. Her 2 old dogs barked once, then quieted the moment they recognized me. She turned on the light, led me into the back living room. A clean bed, a small table, a pot of chamomile tea. It felt like she'd always known the day I'd need this place. "Doesn't it hurt?" Hazel asked as I set down the last box. I sank onto the edge of the bed, looked around. The room wasn't fancy, but it was warm. No pictures of David, no dented kitchen wall from Grant's childhood tantrum. Nothing of mine. And because of that, I felt safe. "No," I said. "I just feel grateful I left while I could still walk out on my own." The next morning, we returned to the old house just after dawn, frost still clinging to the windshield. Hazel drove. I sat beside her with a small bag of final belongings. We didn't speak on the short ride. The car radio played Blue Moon again, looping like a memory that wouldn't let go. The house felt emptier than I expected. No hum from the fridge like every morning. No scent of damp wood in the hallway. I walked in without taking off my shoes. Left faint, muddy prints on the floor like a quiet goodbye. Lacey stood at the door, hands tucked behind her back, unsure whether to step in. I nodded. She didn't greet me, just looked at me and quietly asked, "Can I stay for a bit?" I shifted aside, letting her enter. No invitation, no refusal. She understood. She stepped in, took off her coat, and draped it over the back of the chair like someone who had lived there before. "Have you told anyone?" I asked. "Besides you, no one knows I'm here." I nodded. Lacey didn't look at me. Her eyes moved across Hazel's home, the bookshelf, the oil painting, and lingered on the pot of stew. "You still cook like when I was little." I didn't respond. I served 2 small bowls, set them on the table. No tablecloth, no silverware, just wooden spoons and cold water. We ate in silence. After dinner, I handed her a napkin. Lacey took it, but her eyes never left the old wedding ring I still wore on my left hand. She didn't ask. I didn't explain. Some things are understood in silence. "Mom said you ran away." I smiled softly, not from anger, but because that sentence made me feel a quiet tenderness for her. I didn't run. I simply left on my own terms. Lacey nodded, then whispered like a confession. "I don't want to be like them, but I don't know who I am anymore." I reached out, didn't touch her, just rested my hand near her shoulder. "Then start by spending time with the kind of person you want to become." She was silent, then asked unexpectedly, "Do you still hate my dad?" I thought for a moment, then replied slowly, "I don't need to hate him anymore because I'm no longer held by him." The next morning, snow fell lightly. The first of the season, tapping the roof of Hazel's house like a quiet hello. I rose early, packed a few boxes of teen books into plastic bins. Hazel had already brewed coffee. 2 mugs sat on the table. She didn't ask about the night before, just nodded when she saw me open Lacey's door. The girl still slept, curled under blankets. Watching her, I remembered the nights I stayed up for Grant, counting each cough, each shift in bed. But I wasn't mothering the same way anymore. I simply stood there, holding this moment like a spark that had finally flickered back to life. By noon, I brought Lacey to the open lot behind the church. The RV waited, ready for its first trip to the Mountain Park Fair. Apple jam booths, candle stalls, coffee brewed over metal pots. "Can I come?" she asked. I didn't say yes or no. I just opened the door and motioned her inside. Lacey climbed in, chose the passenger seat, removed her gloves, and held them in her lap. I handed her my notebook. Inside were notes on our book categories: local history, children's titles, women's memoirs. You organize them like this? She asked. Mm-hmm. Not by age, by what people need at the time. She smiled softly, then read carefully, like I once did in our village library, picking books at random because I didn't know what to look for. And those random picks became the ones I remembered most. At the park, we set up our sign, The Quiet Pages. Betty arrived later with cookies and a small card. She handed Lacey a book and said, "Sometimes we need women who write their own endings." I saw Lacey's eyes turn red, but she didn't cry. She closed the book, Hell. I passed through each room, removing framed photos from the walls. Nothing shattered, nothing heavy, just gently undone. Grant's old room still had the hand-drawn picture he made in 3rd grade. I left it there. That room, like so many things, no longer had anything to do with me. I placed the family photos into a small box. Didn't take them with me, just tucked them neatly into the china cabinet where Tanya will likely look later, if she even bothers. I laid the keys in the center of the kitchen table where everything had started. Took a slip of paper from my coat pocket and wrote 5 words in blue ink. The house is sold. Don't contact, no signature, no explanation. Anyone who needed to understand would. Hazel helped carry my bag to the car. I didn't glance back at the porch. Didn't look at the lamp David used to fix every winter. Just climbed into the passenger seat and buckled up. We drove slowly. The town was quiet for a Saturday noon. A few elderly folks waited outside the pharmacy. Familiar faces, but no one looked at me twice. As the car turned off my street, I heard something faint behind us. Footsteps, then a voice. "Grandma." "Grandma, wait!" Hazel glanced in the mirror. I didn't need to look to know who it was. Lacey. She wore a thin jacket, hair messy, bare hands in the cold wind. I saw her running, small, uncertain. Maybe Tanya didn't let her leave. Maybe she snuck out. Maybe it was too late. I didn't ask Hazel to stop. Didn't say a word, just watched through the mirror. Our eyes met for a second. Then she disappeared behind the curve. I closed my eyes, not out of regret, but because I wanted to remember Lacey as she was last year, when she still called me the best grandma in the world. Hazel kept asking what I planned to do next. I didn't answer right away, because for the first time, freedom smelled like dry grass and cinnamon peel. Every morning at Hazel's started with the hiss of an old gas stove and the soft shuffle of elderly dogs on the porch. I always woke before she did, brewed a pot of chamomile tea, and set 2 mugs on the scratched wooden table. Hazel wasn't one for morning talk. She'd just sit down, look out at the yard, and nod slightly when I poured the tea. "What are you planning to do next?" she asked this morning as I folded the local newspaper. I didn't answer immediately. I was still thinking about the chill on my face when I stepped into the yard yesterday evening, the crunch of dry grass beneath my shoes, and that lingering scent of cinnamon peels Hazel left on the stove. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the pressure to give a right answer. I could stay silent, and that somehow was enough. By the weekend, Hazel invited me to the farmer's market. The town had set up wooden tables and white canvas tents, baskets of fresh bread. People greeted each other by name. No introductions needed. There was a small stand with old books, mostly children's, yellowed pages and frayed spines. I stopped at one called The Snowy Day. Inside the cover, in faint pencil, "For Anna. Read with Mom. Christmas 1997. I bought it not for anyone, just because I liked the thought of a child once holding that book like a treasure." On the way back, we stopped by the old church. Pastor Harold was setting up chairs for a weekend story time. When he saw me, he waved and smiled. "Celestine, I kept hoping you'd stop by." I nodded. It's been a long time since I felt like I belonged in a crowd. "Maybe now's the time to begin again," he said, handing me a flyer. "We're looking for a storyteller, someone with a voice low and real enough that kids might believe every word." I didn't promise, but I took the flyer. That evening, with wind curling past the porch, I sat at Hazel's table and sketched something I never thought I'd dare. A mobile library, an old RV fitted with bookshelves. Not much, just wheels and quiet. Hazel glanced over my shoulder. "You're using the house money for this?" I nodded. "I used to live in a wooden box people called a home. Now I want to live in a wheeled box people might call hope." We laughed, soft but real. The next day I reached out to George, a retired high school teacher who used to volunteer at the old library. Loretta, the woman who knitted scarves for orphans. And Betty, a widow who liked doing things just right. They all said yes. We started with cleaning the RV Hazel had tracked down through a friend. Brown interior, worn seats, but the engine still hummed. George built the shelves. Loretta stitched curtains. Betty hand-painted a logo. The quiet pages. I didn't feel tired. I felt whole enough to begin again. That afternoon, we parked the RV in front of the church. The same church I hadn't dared enter just weeks ago. George carried in bins of children's books, alphabetized. Loretta adjusted the fabric tote tied behind the front seats. Betty arranged paper cups and tea bags. "Even books," she said, "deserve something warm beside them." I stepped into the driver's seat. The old cushion sank gently, shaped by whoever sat there too long before me. I placed my hand on the wheel, adjusted the mirror, and whispered half to someone in the past. "Well, not so different from a librarian's chair, is it?" George heard. He nodded, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You never really retired, Celestine." Our first session didn't draw a crowd. Just a few toddlers, 3 or 4 years old, on a blanket, and some young mothers standing back, uncertain. I chose the snowy day, the one from the market. My voice was steady, slow, no drama. I read like I was reading to myself. Or maybe to a granddaughter who never quite had the time to grow in my heart. One young mother, early 20s, a baby slung in cloth across her chest, lingered longer than the others. When I looked up, she smiled. Didn't say a word, but I understood. After the reading, I sat on the church steps and wrapped myself in the old wool scarf David once gave me. The wind came from the west, carrying the scent of cold earth and dried flowers. I had no plans for tomorrow, and for the first time that didn't worry me. Hazel sent me a photo. Loretta tying the Quiet Pages sign to the back of the RV with twine. I saved the picture in an album on my phone titled Things I Chose. Evening fell quickly. I brewed tea and turned on the radio in Hazel's room. A nameless instrumental played and my heart quieted. Then my phone buzzed. A message. The name made me sit up straight. Lacey. Just one line. "Grandma, can I come visit you?" I don't know who else to ask. I placed my hand over the screen, didn't answer, just stared, while my heartbeat settled, one cautious rhythm at a time. My son messaged me too. Sorry, just that. 2 words. No, Mom. No, I was wrong. No asking where I was, if I was okay, or if I needed anything. Just a dangling sentence tossed out like someone trying to shed a weight so lightly I couldn't feel even the slightest burden. I stared at those words on the screen for a long time. My hand rested on the table. I didn't type back, didn't delete it. The message stayed, but I realized some apologies aren't meant to be heard. They're meant to mark the place where you choose not to go back. "Saturday afternoon," Hazel said. "There's a girl asking for you. I had just finished a pot of beef and potato stew, the kind I used to make for Grant during his senior year the night before finals. The smell of meat, carrots, a touch of cinnamon, and a hint of black pepper filled the kitchen with sudden warmth.